Yeah? Okay. Anyway, so, and you mentioned recently that we were going to learn that inside. Is that still coming? Did we cross that?
Well, we had the Mishnah of Rabbi Gamliel speaking about, or Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. We had a Mishnah that implied that they brought the karbanos. They brought the Korban Pesach, the Tanoim that lived 100 years after the Churban Abayis.
Ah, I see.
Mamish. How they would prepare the Pesach, yeah. All right. Guys, it goes mamish from min hakotza el hakotza. And Arvei Pesachim isn't just back to practical halacha, but it's about kiddush. It's not just about Pesach. It's like real halacha l'maisa. All right. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Pesachim Daf Tzadik Tes. First, we will be learning the final Amid of Perek Mishahoya, the 9th chapter. We're going to be concluding and elaborating, learning a Braisa on the Mishnah. In the Mishnah, we had two general cases. We had a case where a Pesach got lost, and there was, let's say, we'll call him a shliach or a representative or someone who went out to find the lost Pesach that we're calling Pesach Aleph. The rest of the group got for themselves Pesach Beis. So we had all different scenarios. Bottom line is that if one asked the other, the shliach tells the group, listen guys, when you bring a new one, have me in mind. Or if the group tells the shliach, if you find Pesach Aleph, have us in mind, then there's one series of halachas, because then indeed, if he finds Pesach Aleph, so de facto there were two karbanos that were slaughtered for the shliach and for the group. So then the general rule is that whichever one was slaughtered first will be their Korban Pesach. But that brought about the challenge that if we don't know which one was brought first, even though everyone fulfilled their obligation, but no one is allowed to eat from either of the Pesachim, because once one was slaughtered, that automatically deregistered them, it removed them, it made them withdraw from the other one. Then we had at the end of that if no one told anything to anyone, so each one is basically on their own, then then the application of that, the conclusion of that will be very simple. If you brought it, if the shliach found it, then he brought it as good, and if not, then he's going to have to bring Pesach Sheni. And then we had the second case in the Mishnah, and that was not that a Pesach got lost, but two animals or more that were pre-registered with groups of people, the animals, the Pesachim got mixed up one with the other, and the basic nakud of the Mishnah is that each group has to retain on it at least one of its original members, and because we could achieve that, and the Mishnah got very creative at the end, even if you had two karbanis that only had one person on each, Reuven on one and Shimon on the other. We're going to speak more, we're going to review it more when we learn the Gemara. Even there, the Mishnah found a solution, even though we don't know which animal belongs to which person, of them being able, as long as they bring in new people off the street, they bring in a Levi, they bring in a Yehuda, and then you can still have one of the original members, as we'll again review when we learn the Gemara, and there's a solution for that as well. The Gemara is going to give many details to that. We're going to quote Machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi also subscribes to the principle that once a Pesach was designated as a Pesach, it may never remain for a moment minui-less, ownerless, but Rabbi Yossi doesn't need for any one of the original members to remain registered on the Pesach. As long as there's someone always registered on the Pesach and it's brought, even if it's at the end of the day being brought for no one of the original group, according to Rabbi Yossi, it's going to be good as well. And that's not the shita of Rabbi Yehuda, and we're going to clarify exactly which Tana from these two is our Mishnah following. We will then start Arvei Pesachim, or there's two versions. Erev Pesachim is another girsa. We'll speak it out when we begin the new Perek. We're going to be learning so many practical halachas, not only regarding Pesach. Nowadays, tragically, in Golos, God willing, Mashiach will be here this year, so we're going to have the Korban Pesach, but the Pesach that we were familiar with, we're going to be learning about the mitzvahs of eating matzah. We're going to be quoting in Tosfos Yerushalmi that kol ha'oichel, whoever eats matzah on the eve of Pesach, he's violating a rabbinic rule, and it's ke'ilu boil arusasi bebeis chamav. It's like a person. These are the words of Chazal. It's like a person having a relation with his wife to be when she's still living with her parents before marriage. He jumped the gun. Now we have minhagim not to eat matzah from way prior to that. Our minig is not to have matzah already from Purim, from right after Purim. But the isur, the rabbanan is on Erev Pesach. We're going to be learning about matzah ashira, wealthy matzah, meaning matzah that's not made out of flour and water. Matzah that's made out of flour and fruit juice. Matzah that's made out of egg matzahs. We're going to see Rabbeinu Tam. We're going to learn some Tosfos in today. We're going to learn about the din of the 4 cups of the Seder, din dalot koises. We're going to be learning, at least in the Rashbam, the origin of the din dalot koises. We're going to be learning about a phenomenal sheet of Tosfos, which is not what we practice, regarding who exactly is obligated to drink the dalot koises. You know, when it comes to Kiddush, nowadays, even though it's ideal, it's a hidur for everyone to taste a little bit of the wine, but that doesn't have to be that way. Today, if you are the one making Kiddush, you have to drink, you know, at least the roiv of the revi'is. But afterwards, everyone fulfilled their obligation, even if they didn't drink any of the wine. What is the din concerning the dalot koises, right? Is it also suffice? Is it enough for the head of the household or from whoever is being appointed to make Kiddush for them to drink the first cup? And everyone will fulfill the obligation that's actually being made on Kiddush, like every other Friday night? Or is there something unique about the din of the dalot cups, of the 4 cups of wine, that every member is obligated to drink the dalot koises, which is how we do it? That's going to be in today's daf. We're going to be learning a machlokes again, just like an Amud Aleph. We're going to have Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. We're going to have an Amud Beis, another machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi regarding every Erev Shabbos, every Erev Yontif. Is there a prohibition or is there an obligation to refrain from eating after a certain point, around the time of Mincha Ketana, that will Chazan again will review, Mincha Gedoyla, Mincha Ketana, in order for people to enter Shabbos with an appetite, to eat the Su'uda of Shabbos and Anyantiv. Shabbos and Anyantiv, eating the meal is it's Divrei Kabbalah, right? It comes, V'karas ala Shabbos Oinig. But nevertheless, we have from the words of the prophets that we're supposed to have a su'ud on Shabbos and on Yom Tov, and it's ideal to eat a meal when you are hungry with an appetite. So do we have such a restriction of what one may not do erev on the eve after a certain point? Or is there no such obligation, no such limitation of eating prior to Shabbos, prior to Yom Tov, and then erev Pesach will be indeed unique and much, much more? Let us start on the Tzadik Ches Amid Beis. We are 3rd line before the bottom of the Amid. So again, we already reviewed in the intro the first section of the Mishnah, speaking about a Pesach that gets lost, and a Shliach goes out there and he's looking for the Pesach Aleph, with all of the cases that we had in the Mishnah. So Tanu Rabbanan, the Braisa makes a very important observation, that in the case where Amar Lohen v'Amru Loi, if the Shliach tells the group, guys, if you get another Pesach, do it for me. And the group tells the Shliach, if you find the Pesach Aleph, do it for us. It means if every Pesach remains connected to all of the people, and yes, the din will then be that whichever one will be slaughtered first will be everyone's mitzvah, and oichel min harishain. Then let me just add the words, etc. But the downside will be that if we don't know which one was brought first, then no one will be able to eat from either of them. And let's contrast that with the last clause in that general case, where loy amar lohen v'loy amru loy. If no one told the other that the Pesach that they bring should be for the other person. So not that they told the shliach or the person who went, not a shliach, someone went to look for it. No one told him, if you find it, bring it for us. They did not tell it to him. He also, before going out to look for the lost Pesach, did not tell the remaining group, if you end up getting a Pesach number 2, have me in mind. If no one told anything to each other, based on the rule that you cannot just bring a Pesach for someone else. A husband to a wife is an exception. A father to his children are exceptions. But generally, if someone did not ask you to register them, you may not. And therefore, each one is bringing for themselves. So then the Mishnah said, right, Einon achroyin zeh lezeh. Now, there is a downside to this latter case. And that is what happens if, let's say, you're the guy that goes looking for the lost Pesach. and you didn't tell people, have me in mind if you buy a new one. You didn't say that. Fine. What happens if you didn't find it? They bought a new one, but you didn't ask them to register you or not. So what's going to be the din? Then you're going to miss the mitzvah. But if you didn't bring your own, then you're going to have to bring Pesach Sheni. But you know what? There's a big upside. At least you know where you're standing. If you found your Pesach, you'll bring it. If you didn't find it, by the way, you can also get a new one for Pesach Rishon. And if God forbid you didn't, you bring Pesach Sheni. You will always eat from it. And even though we are learning, our Mishnah follows the opinions that eating is not essential, but it's definitely ideal. The whole Koren Pesach is being brought for eating. In all of the prior cases in the Mishnah, wherever there's always the possibility, once I am connected to two animals, the downside is that if I don't know which one was brought first, even though I'm going to fulfill my obligation, but I will not be able to eat from either of them. So the Braisa points out the top of Daf Tzadik Tes, Mikan. From this, now we know the source. From this series of laws, say the sages, Yafa shtika lachachamim. Silence is fitting. Silence is beautiful for the wise. And how much more so, kal v'chomer leptipshim. And how much more so for fools. Because if a fool only remains silent, no one will know that he or she is a fool. And that is to their advantage. As King Solomon says, Shenemar Evil Machrish, that if there's a fool, but he's Machrish, but at least he has enough seichel to be silent, so then Chacham Yechashav, he will be considered wise. Gewaldig. It's amazing that Mikan, and guys, just to appreciate this Mikan, also understand that if I did not ask you to have me in mind, I am vulnerable. I might end up not having any Pesach. If I'm the guy that went looking for Pesach Aleph and I don't find it, then I spent the whole afternoon, I'm in action, I'm looking for it. But at least I know where I'm standing. I know that I have to find that animal, and if I don't have it, no one is doing it for me, which really always gives me the option of me on my own buying another one or going to a new group if I don't find my original group. And if none of that happened, at least I will eat Pesach Sheni. So here, when you're talking more, when each group is saying to the other, have me in mind, all of that brings about the downside of if both are brought and we don't know which came first, which is probably very common, then no one will be able to eat from the Koren Pesach. Okay. And now the Gemara, 3 lines from the top, is focusing on the second scenario of the Mishnah. It's not that an animal got lost, but 2 karbanos or more got mixed up, one with the other. No group knows which animal is theirs. So what the Mishnah said is that 2 groups, 2 animals. Each group should take any one of the 2. Now, we don't know whether this was my original or not. And then if you remember, members should go to other groups. Someone from here goes to there, someone from there goes to here. What we accomplished is, in the earlier cases, is that for sure, one of the original members is by the right animal. And everyone makes a statement that, listen, if I was registered on the other one, I'm withdrawing from that, I'm going to this. And v'chulei, and everything works out. Now, the final case in the Mishnah was a lot more complicated, because if we need to have, the way it sounds like, an original member of the group, certainly the animal may never be, even for one moment, ownerless. But the last case in the Mishnah is that there were 2 animals and each one only had one person. And the animals got mixed up. Now, what are you going to do? If I'm going to take one, you're going to take the other. If I'm going to withdraw from mine and go to yours, at that moment, an animal will remain ownerless. So the Mishnah says, doesn't matter. So if there was Reuven and Shimon, Reuven was connected to animal Aleph, Shimon was connected to animal Beis. Get 2 new people, Levi and Yehuda. Reuven should call in Levi, should tell Levi, whichever one of these 2 was mine, you're with me. Doesn't matter that we don't know which animal. Shimon tells Yehuda, whichever one of these 2 was mine, you're with me. So now you have 2 karbanos, each one has 2 people. And now they make, one goes to one side, one goes to the other side. That was the final case of the Mishnah. But here the Gemara is pointing out the following. If that were to happen, here there is a possibility, l'chu'ura, that the animal Aleph won't have with it any one of its original members. Now, any one meaning there was only one original member. Because if Levi and Yehuda actually remain with the animal that Reuven originally was on, but Reuven went to the other group, if Shimon, with Yehuda, if Shimon is the one that changes sides, So true, you accomplished that no animal for a moment remained ownerless, but there's a possibility that no original member will remain with the animal. So therefore, the Gemara says that Lema L'cha'oida, our Mishnah doesn't follow the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. That's more Machmer. What's even Rabbi Yossi, everyone subscribes to the fact that you may never have a Korban Pesach once it's designated, and it's the time to bring the Pesach. There may never be a moment where the animal remains ownerless or minuyless without any registrants. But Rabbi Yossi doesn't need for any one of the original members to remain on the animal. Rabbi Yehuda does. The Tanya, as we learned, that when it says in Parshas Boy, the im yimat habayis mihiyois miseh, the literal pshat is, we quoted this pasuk many times, that being that we have to consume the animal in a very short amount of time, that if a household is so small for the large lamb, in other words, they won't be able to finish it, so they should count in, they should register more people. That's the pshat. The drasha here is the imyimat habayis miyois mesem elamed shemismatim v'holchim. You actually can have people withdrawing, even though they were already registered. How many could withdraw? Ubelvad sheyehei echad mibnei chabura kayim. As long as one original member remains by the animal, only then is it good, so holds Rabbi Yehuda. So if you had 10 people, the original members, and then you got new people, then you got 11, and you got 12, and you got 13. According to Rabbi Yehuda, even though you have 11, 12, and 13, and even if all of the original 10 would withdraw and go to another group, you always will have 11, 12, 13. It's not enough. You have to have one from the originals. Rabbi Yossi doesn't subscribe to that. Rabbi Yossi,
can you just explain how that works? Because normally, didn't we learn that one person buys the lamb? So now he's the original group, just one guy, and then he gets a bunch of people to join him. So when Rabbi Yehuda says you need someone from the original, is it that original guy?
So Danny, that's the key of the answer of the Gemara. Hold that thought. That is what has to be clarified. Good. You said very good. That will be the whole nakud of the sugya. But let's just get the words. Rabbi Yossi says no. The only thing that you may not do is that once it was already designated as a Pesach, and it's a Pesach, you can't have the animal without any registrants. There has to be someone on it. But it doesn't bother me if it's not from the original group. And again, like we explained, when you had the last case in the Mishnah, there was only 2 original people. We're going to call them now the original people, Reuven and Shimon. The animals got mixed up. So the Mishnah was very innovative in saying, first, let Reuven call a new guy, Levi. Let Shimon call in Yehuda. Once you have 2 people, then like the Mishnah says, I don't care if Reuven took the wrong animal. First of all, it could be he took the right animal. You don't know. Even if you took the wrong animal, so what? So what? Somewhat, because there's going to be an exchange. That means that you had Reuven and Levi, Shimon and Yehuda, and then one from each side will go to the other side. So someone will always be on each animal, but it might not be the original members. So l'chayda, our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yehuda. Says the Gemara, no. First of all, it fits with Rabbi Yehuda, and actually our Mishnah is dafka Rabbi Yehuda. That will explain the prior cases. So first, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Dani, that's exactly what. How do you define the original members? How do you define the original members? So you would argue, the simple answer would be, who bought the animal initially? Who was there? It could be that I bought it. It could be that lechatchila there was a group. Says the Gemara, hold on, let's go back and review another machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. We learned the machlokes Rabbi Yehuda holds that one may not have a Korban Pesach for only one person. Remember that sugya? Independent of whether you can eat it or not, whether it's going to become noiser or not. That was the ma'achad. Rabbi Yehuda held that a Korban Pesach always has to be brought for at least 2 people. So therefore, when we speak about the original members, how do you define the original members? If you're going to follow Rabbi Yossi, it mamash fits one with the other. Rabbi Yossi holds that a Korban Pesach may be brought even only for one person. So then if one person bought the animal and designated that animal for a Pesach, that's called the original member. Everyone else that was added on later is called an add-on, but not according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda l'shitasi, who holds that you have to have at least 2 people, he will consider the first and the second person both original, even if they came at different times. So Reuven and Levi are the original members. Shimon and Yehuda are the original members. I don't care which one is going to go to the other side. There will always be at least one original member on each animal. Dafka works like a Rabbi Yehuda. Amar Rabbi Yochanan afilo temer Rabbi Yehuda. Even the Amar Rabbi Yehuda, guys, on that Tzadik Aleph, that was another machlokes Tanoim. That ein shoichten as Pesach ala yachid. This is only Rabbi Yehuda. Therefore, meikara la'amnuye achrina bahadei koi. Even if only one person de facto bought the animal, and he designated the animal as a Pesach, and let's add, then it's Chatzois. Everything that's needed that now it's designated for Pesach. It's not called original because it's not good yet. You cannot bring it yet. You're missing one person. So now how many people do you have to add? Only one. Seder. So therefore, so the second one is the original member. So Aleph, it goes like Rabbi Yehuda. Now says Rav Ashi, I'll tell you a step further. Our Mishnah is dafka not Rabbi Yossi. Cannot be Rabbi Yossi because according to Rabbi Yossi's leniency, that you don't need to have any of the original members, you can never leave the animal ownerless. So when the Mishnah gave the cases of 5 and 5 and 10 and 10, let's read it inside. Because it says, if you had 5 groups, and each group had chamisha, right? Chamish. Each group had 5 registrants, and all the 5 animals got mixed up. So it's not going to be a problem. Why wouldn't it be a problem? Every group of 5 will just take any one of the 5 animals, and then every member will go to one other group. Means every group now will have one from all of the original groups. Why did the Mishnah have to give that case? I mean, this case is dafka. Every animal will have at least one, not at least, it will only have one of its original members. But it has to be 5 animals, 5 groups of 5. Why can't you have 4 groups of 5, but 1 group of 4? Why would that bother me? You understand? Or 1 group of 6 and 1 group of 4. We never allow a group of 4. Because if there would be one animal that has in it only 4, even if you can make a scenario where there will always be someone on that animal, but then one animal will not have on it any of its original members. So let's read it inside. Shal chamisha in. Each animal needed to have 5 people, if we're speaking about 5 groups. Avol shal chamisha, if the roiv are chamisha, but even if only one only had 4 people, and you have 5 animals, so one group had a 6th, you can still make it a way that there is a nice turnover of people, but then then the din will be that you may not bring the Pesach. Why is that? Because the animal that only had 4 members on it, and if you have to move one member to every other group, then one animal will have a registrant. It will have a registrant ba'oifen that it never remained unregistered or registered less, but one of the original members won't be on it. And so what? That's because our Mishnah, yes, Shema Mina, that our Mishnah requires one of the original members. Our Mishnah dafka follows Rabbi Yehuda. Elama, like we explained, since Rabbi Yehuda demands for each animal to have on it 2 people, so the way you define the originals will be the first and the second, even if they didn't come together. And with this, we say, Hadran Allah Mishahaya Tameh. And we also say, to a certain degree, that we are making a siyum today, V'selikala Pesach Sheni, because indeed we were learning all of the dinim of Pesach Sheni, and now the Siyata D'Shmaya, the Tzadik Testament base, we are starting the final chapter of Pesachim. Interestingly, already with the name, that there is a machlokes whether it's Erev Pesachim or whether it is out of a Pesachim. We're going to be learning the Gemara with the Rashbam and with some of Tosfos. Just the Rashbam, Baruch haba to the Rashbam. Whoever did the new cycle, this is the first time we have the Rashbam. So Rashi had 3 daughters, and one of them married Rabbeinu Meir, and he had a son called Rabbi Shmuel. So Rabbi Shmuel ben Meir is the Rashbam, and he is placed under what is on top. If we would have had certainty that it would have been Rashi, then we would have learned it with Rashi. But there's a big question as to who wrote the part on the top. So whenever we don't have Rashi, we go to the Rashbam. We also, you can see from the Tosfos that Tosfos did not have Rashi, because a lot of what he writes is Rashi style. See, Rashi is normally like the teacher. It's simple pshat. And then Tosfos begins to point out that here it says one thing, there it says another thing, you have a contradiction. Mamish, we're going to learn a lot of Tosfos with God's help. because it's mamish like learning Rashi. So starting with the words Erev Pesachim. So I want to start with the first Tosfos. Erev Pesachim. So says Tosfos, Igar Sinan Arvei Pesachim grammatically makes more sense. Arvei Pesachim means on the eves of Pesachs. That means Erev Pesach of every year. Following are the rules for every Erev Pesach. That's called Arvei Pesachim. What does Erev Pesachim mean? So Tosfos says, "V'igar sinan erev hachi ka'amar erev sheshoichaten boy." What's the bach base? Sheshoichaten boy harbei pesachim. In other words, erev. We're speaking about singular, so we're speaking about 1 year. Still, it fits because since many korbanos, that was the day that the Beis Hamikdash was the most busy. So erev of when pesachim are brought. These are the two versions. Anyways, as you can see, even though in our Mishnah it says Erev, but on the header of every daf, we're going to follow the girsa of Arvei Pesachim, and indeed people call this chapter Arvei Pesachim. So Erev Arvei Pesachim. Samuch lemincha. Let's chazer what we had in brachas. There's two minchas. There is mincha gedoyla, mincha ketana. Mincha gedoyla is what we would call 12:30. Even though whenever we speak about 12:30, it's never exactly 12:30. It's really connected to what we call sha'ois manayos. You got to take the day. Let's go from sunrise to sunset, divided into 12. And that will be, so how long will every hour be? Well, not every hour will have 60 minutes. It's called seasonal hours. So when we're speaking about 12:30, it's of sha'ois manayos. But let's just simplify it, 12:30. When, guys, we had this on Daf Nun Ches, Daf Noyach. When is the earliest time that a Koren Talmud was ever brought? 12:30. Really, theoretically, you can bring it right afternoon, but you didn't know if it's right afternoon. From 12:30 is when from they brought it. That time is called Mincha Gedoyla, and until today, one is allowed to daven Mincha, which is in the place of the Talmud in the afternoon, as of Sha'is Maniyah is 12:30. And then, as we also learned in the Mishnah Daf Nun Ches, that when was almost every day in the year, when was the Koren Talmud actually sacrificed, right? 9.5 hours into the day, or 3.5 hours into the afternoon, or what we would call 3:30, but the Shoyz Manis. That is what we call Mincha Ketana. Now, Samuch LeMincha, what Mincha are we referring to? As we will see, we are referring to Mincha Ketana. Now, Mincha means 3:30. Samuch lemincha means 30 minutes prior to mincha ketana. That's the meaning. So Arvei Pesachim, samuch lemincha, close to the time of mincha, prior to mincha, but again mincha ketana, 3 p.m. shoyis maniyos, says our Mishnah, lo yoichal adam, from that time onwards, a person may not eat. Lo yoichal adam ad shetechshach. A person may not eat until it gets dark. Let's learn our first Rashbam. So going from the top of the Rashbams down 9 lines, or the second to last narrow line in the Amid, Lo yoichal adam. Why did the Chachamim make such a takana? Kedei says, this is very important, because guys, we have today similar dinim regarding eating before you daven mincha. And there are times that one may not eat because you might not daven. But then, once you daven mincha, there's no problem with eating or doing other activities that one should not do. This is not related to that, says the Rashbam. It's kedei sheyoichal matzah mitzvah l'teyavain, because we want that since there is an obligation to eat matzah, we prefer for someone to eat that matzah mitzvah with an appetite. And what's the upside of eating it with an appetite? Mishum hidur mitzvah. Interesting. It makes the mitzvah more beautiful. When you enjoy the mitzvah, when you desire the mitzvah, it's an hidur mitzvah. Now, guys, this is a huge theme in Chassidus. Just to know that there's the opposite side. The opposite side is that when we do a mitzvah that we don't understand and we don't desire and we don't feel for, then we are doing it only for God. And that is expressing our bittul to God. And there is a great upside to that as well. Here we're learning the other side of the coin. That not only do we have bittul, or we should have bittul, but there is also, God wants for us, Aleph, the Yesoid, Kabbalah soil, But then for us to try to make our effort to understand, and for us to have a feeling, and for us to have a desire. And as we just mentioned yesterday, when it comes to Talmud Torah, we say, V'ha'arevna, that may the words be sweet. We want it to be sweet. Part of the mitzvah is to enjoy it. So hidur mitzvah here would mean to enjoy the matzah, meaning also to have an appetite. Okay, so
Rabbi,
says,
what are we doing this year with the Shlishis?
we'll speak about that soon. We have to first speak about Purim. It's mamish connected to today's daf. Just to explain what Shlomo is asking, that when there's a mitzvah to eat, like this year Pesach falls out, Motzoi Shabbos, Seuda Shlishis is a mitzvah. If we're going to fulfill that mitzvah, it's going to take away from the Teyavim. And my friends at Shlomo, this is not only this year, but every Seudas mitzvah, like when you have a bris. So you should know like this, that Ramah writes, let's go this year, but we're learning Tafshan Peyal of other. Pesach, Purim falls out here, but Chutz La'aretz, it falls out on Friday. No, it's outside Yerushalayim. The 14th day is on Friday. There's a mitzvah to have a Su'udah. That Ramah paskins that you should have the Su'udah in the morning. Because to eat the Su'udah Shabbos l'teyavim. And then he brings down that if you have it in the afternoon, to have it at least before the 10th hour of the day. Mamish, what we're learning right now. The Alter Rebbe doesn't bring such a thing. We'll speak about that soon. But that's a big topic. Just to be aware that if the meal Erev is a Su'udas mitzvah, this goes to a bris, then many people are very lenient. Because don't forget that, like Rashbam says, not eating is because of Hidur mitzvah. Now, of course, if you could accommodate both. But if you were to eat later in the day, and that meal is a mitzvah itself, a mitzvah trumps a Hidur mitzvah.
Rabbi,
yes.
Regarding Shabbos, isn't there, as much as we're saying that there's an inyan to be hungry, but there's also an inyan to taste food going into Shabbos, where it sounds like here...
It's not a contradiction. So we're gonna learn a
Pesach, we're saying we're not allowed to,
right? That will clarify what you're saying. Okay. Now, you know what? We'll go straight to the Tosfos. Look inside the second Tosfos. Says Tosfos Perush. Again, he's like, the Rashbam was more bekitzin, but he's acting like Rashi. But what the Tosfos also points out is, don't connect the Isur of eating with because you didn't daven, which is a big theme. It's not this. Afilu ispalo. You daven mincha gedoyla. Umishum matzah kidomrin and bigamara. The beloy yispalo tfilas mincha afilu b'shari ma'isashana asur, as we had in the beginning of Shabbos Daftas. Now asks Tosfos, Danny, this will answer your question. What did the Chachamim say? What exactly should you not eat? See, we are living in a different culture. You know what food meant for them? Bread. Everything else was tama nash. So, guys, Tosfos doesn't have to mention that, which is obvious. Chametz, we already learned in the first chapter, may already not be eaten biblically from noon, midoiraisa, right? And then we added 1 hour, we added 2 hours prior to noon. So chametz you can't eat. What exactly? Food is bread. What bread would you be able to eat? And the Chachamim say, no, don't eat it because you're not going to eat it l'teyav. You're not going to eat the matzah with appetite. Matzah, afilu koydem nami yaser. Matzah may not be eaten by rabbinic law from the morning of Erev Pesach, aside of our minig. Again, our minig is not to eat it either 2 weeks before or a month before. Kid amrinin bi Yerushalmi. Kol ha'oichel matzah be'erev Pesach. Whoever eats matzah on the eve of Pesach, ki'ilu boyel arusasa bebeis chamav. It's tantamount to a person, God forbid, having a relation with his kala before he took her to the chuppah. So you're going to answer, that's your question, Danny. But mini targima. Mini targima means everything other than bread. By the way, this includes meat. What we would call a meal, having some toya meha chayim zachu, right? That's what Danny is quoting. That whoever eats from its food tastes life. That's a remez. To eat from Shabbos food before Shabbos. So you're going to taste a little bit of the meat. You're going to have some fruits. You're going to have some vegetables. Or you're going to have a smoothie. All of these things. The Tosfos says we're going to learn soon that you could. That's not included in the Gezerah. You can eat up until the end, Danny. Until Shkia, guys. Once Shkia comes, then you can't eat anything until you make Kiddush. That's a Gavaldik Kakash. It's based on the premise that eating means flour from the 5 grains. So what exactly are you not allowed to eat? So answers Tosfos v'yesh loimer the ayra b'matzah ashira. Rich matzah means matzah that's not flour and water. It's flour and fruit juice. Which is dangerous when it comes to it becomes chametz quick, or it doesn't become chametz at all. That whole sugya, right? We say that it doesn't become chametz at all. Or if you have flour and eggs, what we call egg matzah, chocolate coated matzah, any type of matzah that one may not use to fulfill one's obligation of eating matzah at night, because matzah has to be lechem oini, which means many things. It means lechem she'oinin aleha devarim harbe, but it also means bread of the poor, flour and water. There's nothing else in the matzah other than flour and water. Matzah ashira, since that matzah may not be used to fulfill your obligation. So when we quoted the Yerushalmi, kol ha'ochel matzah be'erev Pesach il bo'er arusasoi, it doesn't go for a matzah that is good enough for the mitzvah. Matzah ashira is not included in that gezerah. The liyasa be the Yerushalmi elaba matzah ru'oyelot says b'chayvasoi. Gewaldig. And if you eat that matzah, then you boil arusasai. Abel matzah ashira, you are allowed to eat on Erev Pesach. That is the matzah that the Mishnah is saying, that Chazal here, Arvei Pesachim, are saying, lo yoichal, from samuch lemincha at shetechshach. Matzah ashira is that which should not be eaten. And you know what Tosfos says? V'chein hoya noyeg Rabbeinu Tam. What exactly does that mean? He was noyeg dafka to eat matzah ashira every year, or was the Rabbeinu Tam referring to like this year, where Shabbos is Erev Pesach, and here you have a mitzvah of having Su'udah Shabbos? Forget about this Su'udah Shlishis, Shalosh Shudas. Speak about the eating in the morning. Now, if a person is going to daven early this year, then you can, and you're going to end up eating before this man of Isur Achilas Chametz, then you can have proper Chametz. And we're going to speak about, and then you have to figure out how to dispose of Chametz, even though we made a burning of the Chametz Friday at the same time, to have the same time consistent. But what do you do with the remainder? So we have to dispose of it. We flush it down the toilet. If there's some crumbs left, and there's always some crumbs left, v'chulei. But if you miss the time, so then you can fulfill your mitzvah Su'udah Shabbos with matzah ashira. That's called food. It's from the 5 grains. That is what the Mishnah is referring to. Next line, ad shetechshach. Very important. You may not eat until it gets dark. Now, guys, dark does not mean shkia. Dark means seis, and this is a very important liner. Guys, when it comes to Shabbos, we are allowed to take in Shabbos early. Yes, we have to daven mincha before plaga mincha, but if we do so, we can take in Shabbos early. When we take in Shabbos early, we can make kiddush before it's dark. Lechatchila. Not on Pesach. That's the achetechshach, that you may never take this in early. One will not be allowed to eat until it gets dark. Only from then on do you begin. Now, we're not going to begin with the meal. We're going to begin with the first of the 4 cups, Seder. But that has to be after dark. Another din of the Mishnah. I just want you to know every line is packed. People can spend forever, but we're going to try to, as of tomorrow, go a lot quicker. Afilu anishu Yisrael, even if someone, God forbid, is poor, lo yochel at sheyasef. Another din, he should only eat as he reclines. Now, reclining is a stamp of freedom. Free people used to eat reclining on their left. Unlike people that are not free, were not allowed to recline. It was not the way, it was not their modo de operandus. And as we will be learning, that part of the Seder, or the mitzvah of retelling the story, isn't only verbal, it's also primarily verbal, but it's about enacting. It's about reliving. It's ideally about having the experience. Part of the experience of freedom is to recline. Now, we don't recline by everything. It's generally on those items that are connected to the redemption. The other items, like the mother, that are connected to the servitude, in which we don't recline. Our minig Chabad is that women don't recline. But the concept of reclining, even during an era where wealthy people still reclined and poor people never did. On Pesach, everyone is the wealthy person. On Pesach, everyone is a free person. Another din. It's amazing how the Mishnah writes it. It's a beautiful Rabbi. He doesn't write it, you have to have 4 cups. That will be Pasha. The Rambam writes that way. Rabbi HaKadosh writes that that if you have a poor person who doesn't have funds, so he's being supported by the community. Now the community is not obligated to give someone beyond the basic needs. On the night of Seder, the basic need is 4 cups of wine. No less than 4 cups of wine. It's amazing. No less. Can you imagine who would write that way? And tamchoy, there were different types of charity funds amongst Jewish communities. One was money, and one is called a food platter. Now, who is eligible, sadly, to receive funds from the tamchoy tzedakah kasa? The poorest of the poor, the people that had the least. There were many people that qualified to get money, but they did not qualify to get food from the food platter. So even if someone is receiving money from the tamchoy, nevertheless, he's mechuyev to have no less than 4 cups of wine. It's getting late. I want to read at least some of the Rashbam, in middle of the Rashbam under the Gemara. So he's quoting from a Bereshis Rabbah, from Rav Huna b'shem Rab Abba Amar, keneged arba l'shoyne geula, hu amurim begolos Mitzrayim, v'hoitzeisi v'go'alti v'lokachti v'hitzalti. And note how the seder of the words is, whoever's a Balkaida, or if you learn Chitas really good, it's out of the order, just to be aware of that. So Rashi brings over, and there's so many other sources for the Dalot Koises. Everyone has to have Dalot Koises. Now, at least one Tosfos. I want you to know everything here is jammed, is loaded. Look inside the second Tosfos in the widest lines. The line begins, Tosfos, Divrei HaMaschil, lo yivchasu loima arba koises. Says Tosfos, mitoy chaloshin mashma ktsas, that from the way Rabbi wrote the Mishnah, because Rabbi wrote it in the singular, loy yivchasu loy, don't give him, not the family, not every individual. Don't give him less. We're not obligated to give every member in the household of the ani, only for him. And for whom? And he's going to make kiddush. And yes, he will drink the wine, but no one else will have wine. And it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter, says Tosfos. It's not that every individual has to have their own dalot koises. And Tosfos adds, this svarahu makes sense because the Mishnah arba koises mikiddish, the chalashana. When it comes to kiddush the whole year, it's good to know, guys. I know that our minig is everyone will taste it. First of all, everyone that tastes a little bit of the wine, no one has to have a roiv revis. No one does that. Many people might do it as an option, but you don't need that. You really don't even need for anyone to drink any of the wine. It says in Shulchan Aruch, everyone tasting some of the wine is ahida. It's beyond the letter of the law. So Tosfos says, she'echad moitzi es kulam. So why would this be different than Kiddush? Oh, guys, if you would know how much books were written on this Tosfos, it's amazing. We don't accept this. We say no. We say that actually, when it comes to the Seder night, what we do, everyone has a cup, and everyone says the Kiddush. They say the Kiddush, and everyone drinks the Kiddush. And according to that, you have to support not only the ani, everyone in the ani's household with at least dollar. The at least is the best. I love that at least because that's already a remez to Mashiach and to the Koshel Elyahu. But when it comes to giving tzedakah, then you're not mechuyev to supply. It doesn't say you're not allowed to. It says you're not obligated to give every ani more than the 4 cups. Okay, Chavra, let's start with the Gemara. Says the Gemara. I don't understand. But Erev Pesach, you may not eat samoch lemincha, to eat matzah with an appetite. Don't we have the same concept every Erev Shabbos? Not about Tosfos. We are agreeing with the Rashbam and with the Tosfos. We're not speaking about every weekday. Every weekday, the issue is not to have a meal before you daven mincha. Now, parenthetically, we, thank God, have the schus to daven with a minyan. If we have a fixed time to daven with a minyan, then there's no problem having a meal. Like we daven over here right before Shkia, but we daven every day together. I can have a meal 4 p.m. even though I didn't daven mincha because I have a fixed time to daven mincha. We're speaking about someone that doesn't go to a minyan and they have no fixed time. They're b'chlal, don't eat a meal, bread, before you daven mincha. I get that. The Mishnah is speaking about even if someone daven mincha. The issue of the mitzvah, like the Rashbam says, like Tosfos says, is that we want to make sure that at night when you eat the matzah, you eat it with an appetite. Hidur mitzvah. Well, every Shabbos and Yom Tov, there is a mitzvah to eat. So my area, Arvei Pesachim, you see the Gemara's Girsa was Arvei Pesachim, not Erev Pesachim. Afilu Arvei Shabbos V'Yomim Tovim. We also have the same Takonas Chachamim D'Tanya. Now really it's a Machlokas Tanoim. Lo yoichal Adam ba'Arvei Shabbos V'Yomim Tovim min ha-mincha ulamayla. Note the difference. Our Mishnah says Samuch LaMincha. Here in this Braisa number 1, it says Min ha-mincha. That's already a difference. Mincha means mincha ketana. Mincha ketana is shoyis manayo is 3:30 p.m. Samuch lemincha means 30 minutes prior. That will be one approach. But let's go just generally. You can't have a mincha mayla. Why? Same thing. Kadeshi yakanes l'shabbos kishahu ta'ava. Ta'ava means we want you to have a type. We want you to have an appetite. Divided Rabbi Yehuda. Now Rabbi Yosi Omer. That there is no such rabbinic enactment by Erev Shabbos and Erev Yom Tov. You can eat until it gets dark. The Gemara's Havamina is based on the premise that our Mishnah cannot be Rabbi Yosi. Why? Because just like Rabbi Yosi is not worried about an appetite for Shabbos and Yom Tov, why would Rabbi Yosi be worried about an appetite for Pesach? Well, it's the same thing, mitzvah. That's the Havamina. So it must be that our Mishnah is following Rabbi Yehuda. So then what's unique about Erev Pesachim or by Arvei Pesachim? It's not a din regarding Pesach, it's a din regarding all the Yom Tovim. Answers the Gemara, Amar Afuna, no, the premise of your question was wrong. We assumed that our Mishnah cannot be Rabbi Yosi because again, Rabbi Yosi doesn't care about an appetite here. Why would he care there? Why would he care about over here? No, there's a difference. Amar Afuna lo yitzricha elo Rabbi Yosi. And our Mishnah is not Rabbi Yehuda. What did we have in the last Amid? That the last Mishnah in the last 9th Perek was Dafke Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Yosi, you can have from the 5 groups, 1 group can be a 4. There's a flow here. So that was Rabbi Yehuda. Rav Huna says this Mishnah is Dafke not Rabbi Yehuda. It's not Dafke not. Rabbi Yehuda would agree to it, but Rabbi Yehuda wouldn't give you a din only for Pesach. The Omar Rabbi Yosi says generally Oichel v'Hoilach Hatchetechshach. So we need to know, Hanamili, where does Rabbi Yosi not care about an appetite? Or he's not concerned that eating will take away your appetite? Maybe Rabbi Yosi felt you can have a meal with bread and you can still have an appetite. You know, sometimes eating opens up the appetite. In other words, yes, there's a mitzvah to eat on Shabbos, but chevre, where does that come from? V'korasa la Shabbos oinig Yeshaya divrei Kabbalah. Words of the prophets. Words of the prophets have more weight than rabbinic law, but it's not biblical law. When it says in Parshas Boy, bo'erev toichlu matzos, that's a biblical commandment. You can't compare one with the other. That's called a chiyuv. Here, Rabbi Yosi is more concerned. No food from Samuch Lemincha. That's answer number 1. Now, Rav Papa Amar, he's going to give answer number 2, and his answer will be refuted. Rav Papa Amar, Afilu Temer Rabbi Yehuda, look at the words of the Braisa that we quoted, look at the words of the Mishnah, and they are not the same. Over there, Hassan, if you look in the Braisa, it says, Ba'arve Shabbos v'Yomim Tovim. What does Rabbi Yehuda say? From when may one not eat a meal of bread or of products that come from the 5 types of grains? Min ha-mincha ulamaylo da'aser. Mincha ketana is shazmani is 3:30. However, samuch lemincha, prior to mincha, close to mincha, earlier, shari, aval be'erev Pesach, that's the novelty. It's not the concept, but it's it's a quantitative addition. It's even more time than erev Pesach afilu samuch lemincha nami yaser. Okay, correcting Gemara. Ube'erev Shabbos samuch lemincha shari. Now we're going to have something that we have to become familiar. Mishnayos was written with the Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya. The Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya. Every word, every letter was thought out for a long time. there's a certain precision to the Mishnah, and there's a certain brevity to the Mishnah that no other work of the oral Torah has. God forbid, we're not minimizing braises. Braises generally are lengthier, and on top of that, not everyone knew all the braises, and because of the fact that it wasn't reviewed and memorized with the same vigor as Mishnayos, some braises, what we will call, became corrupted. That means that people kept on memorizing them, but they got something wrong. So yeah, the brisa that we quoted doesn't write samach lamincha, writes clearly min hamincha. But now we're going to learn brisa number 2. Now one of these 2 brisas are wrong, and we're going to determine which one is wrong. For Hatanya, it says that we'll call this brisa number 2. Lo yoichel adam be'erev Shabbos uviyamim toivim. Look at these words now. Not min hamincha, miteisha shoy sulamayim. Mincha is teisha v'chatzi. Samuch lemincha, what we call 3 p.m., is really 9 hours from the morning. Same thing. Miteisha shoy sulamayim. Kedei she'yikonis l'Shabbos kishehu taiva divrei Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosi omer hoylach hoylach hachetechshach. Clearly, this brisa said exactly the same by Erev Shabbos and Yom Tov and Erev Pesach. Now, the first answer of Rav Huna is great. Rav Huna says exactly, our Mishnah is even l'shitas Rabbi Yosi. It's only l'shitas Rabbi Yosi. According to Rabbi Yehuda, there's no chiddush. But you, Rav Papa, the premise of the answer is based on a erroneous brisa. Now, the Gemara counters, Amar Marzutra. We don't jump to say that a brisa is corrupt. We're speaking about something was wrong. But if you have 2, it's either one or the other. So, man leimelach de metaretz tehi. How do you know that this one, teretz means an answer. Teretz means that this is the one that's authoritative. How do you know the second one is authoritative? Daf kuf dilma mishabesh tehi. Maybe the second one that you quoted, this one is corrupt, and the first one we quoted in the beginning of the Gemara, that's the one that's authoritative. So one of them is wrong. So Amar lei mereimar di temar abiyemar. I'll tell you how I know that the latter one is correct. And the latter one refutes Rav Papa's answer. Because this is the way Torah, oral Torah, it's about who taught it. It's about who taught it. And when I went to the lecture of Rav Pinchas, and it's not even that he taught the Braisa, but since the Kam Tane, the Tana Kamei, the word Tana normally means a rabbi from the era of the Mishnayos. But no, not over here. Rav Pinchas is a Amoira. So the Kam Tana, the Tana Kamei means that you had certain individuals from a later era that they were the memory geniuses. They knew everything by heart. And they, like today, you open up a book. Then you would call that person and tell them, say, Zog, Chazan, review again. And he was the one that taught the latter Braisa. Not Mina Mincho Lamayla, but Mitesha Shoisu Lamayla. And when he said it in front of Rav Pinchas, no one, Rav Pinchas didn't push back. So that's the way the Messiah works. When you have someone at the caliber of Rav Pinchas that heard the latter Braisa and accepted it, it means that the latter one is authoritative, meaning that the one that we began the Gemara with, that's the one that became corrupted. So that refutes the answer of Rav Papa. No, our Mishnah cannot be Rabbi Yehuda, because then there's nothing novel about the Erev or Arvei Pesachim, and therefore Elam Chaverta must be like Rav Huna, that our Mishnah is following Rabbi Yosi, when that Chiddush, and that's a big Chiddush, that he's not concerned about having an appetite. It's not that he doesn't care about an appetite. Divrei Kabbalah, Divrei Chachamim are important. Divrei Kabbalah, of course, are important. He feels that your person can have bread in the afternoon and they will still have an appetite. A person will be mindful, but there's something unique since there is a biblical mitzvah, the Erev Teichel Matzah, so it's amazing. So because of a hidur mitzvah, the Chachamim made a gzeira. Not a hidur mitzvah, it's just a hidur. Now we have a gzeira. You may not eat matzah ashira. Toisves, you may not eat matzah ashira. Misamuch lemincha ulamayla chevra, to be continued.
Yeah.
Guys, I'll let you know later.
Thank you, Rabbi.
I would like tomorrow to learn 2 daf. Let's see if we even have to start before 6. And if we have to start before 6, it's just going to be a little bit before 6.
Back to back?
Go a little bit quicker.
Back to back, Rabbi?
Correct, Rabbi. Correct.
Of course, back to back. Yeah, from 6 to 7.
Face to face.
5 to 6 or something like that.
Great.
Okay. Have a great day, guys.